She had wandered for as long as she could remember, never stopping in one place for more than a few days. Life had not been kind to her. She had no family, no home, and no one to call her own. Each town she visited seemed to close its doors on her before she could even knock. People looked at her ragged clothes, her tired eyes, and the way she carried herself, and they made up their minds before she could explain who she was or where she had come from. She was invisible in a way, overlooked by most, judged by some, and avoided by many, yet she kept moving forward, driven by a quiet determination that told her survival was worth every struggle. The nights were the hardest. She had slept under the open sky, wrapped in whatever scraps she could find, and listened to the wind whisper through the trees. Sometimes it brought memories she could not shake, faces that had hurt her, moments when trust had been broken. She missed the warmth of a real bed, the comfort of steady hands, the safety of someone looking out for her, but she had grown used to the cold, to the loneliness, and to the constant uncertainty. She had learned to rely only on herself. One morning, after days of walking along dusty paths and abandoned roads, she found herself at the edge of a forest that stretched endlessly into the distance. The air smelled different here, fresher, cleaner. Birds called to one another from the high branches, and a soft breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. She paused, taking it all in. It was a place far from the towns and the judgment she had known. It was wild, untamed, and it felt like a world apart from the life she had been forced to lead. She stepped cautiously onto the narrow trail that led into the forest. Each step was deliberate, as though the ground itself might reject her if she were careless. Her stomach ached from hunger, and her hands bore the faint bruises of days spent searching for food and shelter. Yet something about the forest made her heart lift. A small hope that maybe here, no one would chase her away. No one would turn her away. Hours passed, and she moved deeper into the woods, finding a small stream where the water ran clear over smooth stones. She knelt beside it, cupping her hands to drink. The cool water soothed her parched throat, and she allowed herself a brief moment of peace. She watched a fish dart through the shallow current and marveled at its effortless movement. For the first time in many days, she felt a connection to the world around her. She was not alone here, not completely. The forest seemed to embrace her, offering safety and quiet companionship. That night, she made a small camp near the stream, using fallen branches to create a fire. The flames crackled and warmed her hands as she gathered whatever scraps of food she had managed to scavenge. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that tomorrow might bring hunger again. But for now, she allowed herself to feel something close to contentment. She was surviving, and that in itself was an achievement. Sleep came fitfully, but it was deeper than she had felt in many months. She dreamed of a life she had never had, a home with walls that offered protection, a fire that never went out, and a person who would look at her with kindness rather than suspicion. In the morning, she awoke to birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. The forest had not changed, but somehow she felt a shift within herself. She had hope, even if it was fragile, and it made the day seem lighter. As she continued along the trail, she noticed signs of human presence, footprints pressed into the soft earth, a faint path worn by travel. It made her cautious. People in her past had often brought disappointment and pain, yet curiosity drew her forward. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone here who would not see her as a burden or a stranger. Maybe there was a chance for connection in this remote, quiet place. By midday, she reached a small clearing, where sunlight poured through gaps in the trees, illuminating a modest cabin nestled against a hillside. Smoke rose from its chimney, carrying the scent of cooking food. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the first sign of another human being she had seen in a long time, and the instinct to hide warred with a growing curiosity. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Her past had taught her that people often brought pain, but something about this place, about the way the cabin seemed to sit quietly among the trees, suggested a gentleness she had not felt in years. She stayed at the edge of the clearing, watching from a distance. Movement inside the cabin caught her eye, and she saw a figure, a man, going about his work. He was large and rugged, with hands strong from labor and a face that carried both strength and calm. There was an air of solitude about him, as if he lived in harmony with the mountains themselves. She felt a mix of fear and fascination. He might chase her away, or he might be different, someone who could offer the safety she had been searching for. For hours she observed him from the trees, taking note of his routines and the quiet care with which he moved through his day. He chopped wood, tended to a small garden, and seemed completely at ease in the wilderness. She marveled at his ability to thrive in such a rugged place, surviving and creating a home where most would struggle. There was a quiet dignity in him, a balance between strength and gentleness that drew her in despite her caution. As the sun began to set, she retreated deeper into the forest to make camp for the night. She found a sheltered spot beneath a large tree, where the roots formed a natural barrier against the wind. She built a small fire, feeling the warmth against her skin, and allowed herself to think about the cabin she had seen. She did not know the man inside, and yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt the stirrings of hope. Perhaps he could offer her more than just food or shelter. Perhaps he could offer the sense of belonging she had longed for. Night fell, and the forest grew quiet, save for the occasional call of an owl or the rustle of leaves. She lay close to her fire, listening to the sounds around her, and thought about her life, the wandering, the hunger, the endless search for a place to be safe. She had always been careful, always ready to move at a moment's notice. But for the first time, she considered staying in one place, even if only to see what the man in the cabin was like. She wondered if he could be different, if he could see her as more than a nameless wanderer. The next morning, she rose early, brushing the dew from the grass and packing her few belongings. Hunger gnawed at her, but she moved with purpose, following the trail back toward the clearing. She wanted to see the cabin again, to observe the man at work, and to decide whether this could be a place where she might finally rest. Her heart beat faster as she approached, a mixture of fear and anticipation swirling inside her. When she arrived at the edge of the clearing, the man was already outside, carrying buckets of water from a nearby spring. He moved with steady confidence, unaware of her presence. She watched him carefully, noting the way he balanced the buckets with ease and the thoughtful way he tended to his surroundings. There was a rhythm to his day, a harmony with the land that she had never known but instinctively understood. She felt drawn to it, as if the mountains themselves were inviting her to step closer. She lingered, unsure whether to make her presence known. Her life had taught her caution, but curiosity and a faint hope nudged her forward. She took a small step and then another, moving closer to the clearing where the man worked. She kept to the shadows, careful not to startle him, yet unable to resist the desire to observe, to learn, to imagine what life might be like if she were part of this quiet world. Hours passed, and she remained hidden, watching the man as he went about his tasks. He was methodical and patient, never rushing, never seeming frustrated. She admired the way he respected the land, taking only what he needed and leaving the rest untouched. There was a dignity in his work, a calm strength that made her heart ache with longing for a life that seemed so far out of reach. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, she retreated to the forest once more, setting up a small fire for warmth. She thought about the man, about the cabin, and about the strange sense of hope that had taken root in her chest. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, whether he would welcome her presence or chase her away. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of something more than survival. Dreams of kindness, of safety, and perhaps of a place to call home. The next morning, she awoke with the sun, feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The previous day's encounter with the cabin and the man had planted a seed of hope in her heart, a hope she had not felt in years. She knew she could not stay hidden forever. The hunger in her stomach reminded her that survival required courage, and perhaps this man could offer more than just food. Perhaps he could offer understanding, a safe place to rest, and maybe even kindness. She moved cautiously toward the clearing, her feet light on the soft forest floor. Her heart pounded with every step, fear and anticipation dancing together in her chest. The man was outside already, tending to the small garden near his cabin. He worked with careful precision, his hands strong and sure, planting seeds and watering them with steady, practiced movements. There was a calm rhythm to his work, and she watched silently, captivated by the quiet efficiency and the peacefulness that seemed to surround him. After a while, she stepped closer, her presence no longer hidden by the trees. The man noticed her immediately, pausing his work to look at her. There was no anger or suspicion in his eyes, only curiosity. He tilted his head, studying her for a moment, as if trying to understand who she was and why she had come. She felt a mixture of fear and relief. His gaze was steady but not harsh, and something in his demeanor made her feel less like an intruder and more like a guest, even though she had nothing to offer and no home to call her own. "You must be hungry," he said finally, his voice calm and even. It was not an accusation or a question, only a statement, and it carried a warmth that made her chest ache with longing. She nodded, unsure if her voice would betray her need. He set down the watering can and beckoned her closer. There was a fire nearby, and a pot of something fragrant was simmering over it. The smell made her stomach growl, and she realized how long it had been since she had eaten a proper meal. She approached cautiously, keeping her distance but allowing herself to be drawn in by the promise of food and safety. The man gestured to a small wooden bench near the fire, and she sat, her hands trembling slightly from hunger and nerves. He ladled a portion of stew into a bowl and handed it to her. The warmth of the food against her hands was comforting, and when she took the first bite, she was struck by how much she had missed the simple pleasure of a meal prepared with care. As she ate, he watched her with quiet patience, never rushing her or pressing her for answers. She realized that he did not expect her to explain herself, to justify her presence, or to reveal her past. He only offered what he could give: food, warmth, and a moment of peace. That simple act, the absence of judgment and the presence of kindness, made her eyes well with tears she could not hold back. She thanked him softly, her voice barely above a whisper, and he nodded, accepting her gratitude without fuss. They sat in a companionable silence for a while, the forest around them alive with sound yet somehow distant. She felt a strange sense of belonging, even though she had only just arrived. The mountain man's presence was steady and grounding, and for the first time in her life, she felt that perhaps she could stay in one place without fear. After the meal, he invited her to help with chores around the cabin. At first she hesitated, unsure if she was welcome, but he smiled gently, assuring her that she could stay close and observe at first. She followed him cautiously, learning how to chop wood safely, how to carry water without spilling, and how to tend to the small garden. He explained everything patiently, never rushing, always allowing her to understand each task fully. She was amazed at his knowledge and the care he put into every action, and she felt a deep respect growing for this man who had lived in harmony with the mountains for so long. Days turned into weeks, and she settled into a rhythm alongside him. She learned to hunt small game, gather wild plants, and recognize the signs of changing weather. Each day she gained new skills and a deeper understanding of the land. More importantly, she began to feel a connection to the man, a bond forged through shared work and silent companionship. She trusted him in ways she had never trusted anyone, yet she remained cautious, aware that her past had taught her to protect her heart. The mountain man, in turn, began to rely on her presence. He noticed her quiet resilience, her ability to adapt and learn, and her willingness to contribute without complaint. He admired her determination and the spark of hope that seemed to glow even in the face of hardship. Though he spoke little of his feelings, his actions conveyed care and protection. He made sure she had warm clothing, shared knowledge of the forest, and included her in decisions about their daily life. It was a slow, steady building of trust, a mutual understanding that words alone could not convey. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, they sat by the fire together. She watched the flames dance, mesmerized by their warmth and the comfort they offered. He spoke softly about the land, telling stories of the mountains, the animals, and the changing seasons. She listened intently, feeling a connection not just to him but to the world around her. She realized that she had never experienced this kind of peace before, this sense of being part of something larger and yet intimately connected. Occasionally, she would share small details of her past, careful not to reveal too much, but enough to show that she was not entirely unfamiliar with hardship. He listened without judgment, his eyes never leaving hers, offering silent understanding. She felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the burden of being nameless and alone easing slightly in his presence. She began to understand that trust was not a weakness, but a bridge to connection, and that perhaps she could allow herself to be seen without fear. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. She began to notice the small ways he cared for her, bringing her favorite herbs for cooking, ensuring she had warm blankets, and speaking words of encouragement when she struggled with a task. Each gesture, though simple, carried immense meaning, and she found herself thinking of him often, feeling a warmth in her chest that she had not known for years. It was a fragile, growing trust, but it felt like the first step toward a life she had only dared to imagine. One particularly cold night, a storm swept through the mountains and they huddled together by the fire for warmth. The wind howled outside, and rain pelted the roof of the cabin, but inside there was a sense of safety and security she had never experienced. She realized that the mountain man had become more than a companion. He was a protector, a guide, and perhaps unknowingly, a source of comfort that she had been longing for her entire life. In that moment, she understood that she was no longer entirely alone, and the thought filled her with a sense of hope that was almost overwhelming. She knew that her journey was far from over, and that life in the mountains would not be without challenges. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she could belong somewhere, that she could trust someone, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she could find happiness in this quiet, rugged place. The mountain man had offered her not only food and shelter, but the chance to be seen, to be valued, and to start rebuilding the fragments of a life she had once thought lost forever. As the storm raged outside, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and connection. She had found someone who looked beyond her past, beyond her appearance, and saw the strength, resilience, and humanity within her. And though she did not yet know what the future held, she felt ready to face it, knowing that for the first time in her life, she was not entirely alone. As the days and weeks passed, she found herself settling into a rhythm of life in the mountains. She woke with the sun, joined the mountain man in his chores, and learned to navigate the forest and streams with a growing confidence. She became skilled at identifying edible plants, catching fish, and tending to the small garden near the cabin. Each day, her body grew stronger and more accustomed to the rugged life, and she discovered a resilience within herself that she had not realized existed. The challenges of survival were hard, but they gave her a sense of purpose and accomplishment she had never known before. Trust, however, was still a delicate matter. Though the mountain man treated her with kindness and patience, she remained cautious. Past experiences had left deep scars, and she often found herself hesitating, afraid to fully let someone in. Yet his steady presence and gentle guidance slowly chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. She began to understand that trust was not a surrender, but a choice, and that choosing to trust someone could lead to a deeper connection than she had ever imagined. He continued to teach her, showing her how to make tools, how to store food for winter, and how to build simple structures that could withstand the harsh mountain weather. She was grateful for his patience, and over time, the fear that had once dominated her thoughts began to fade. She could see the logic in his actions, the care in his decisions, and the quiet strength that guided his every movement. Observing him, she learned not just skills for survival, but also lessons about patience, respect for nature, and the value of quiet observation. During one long day of work, as they repaired a small section of the cabin roof damaged by the last storm, she found herself watching him closely. He moved with precision, lifting heavy beams and positioning them with care. She noticed the way his eyes scanned the surroundings constantly, alert to every detail yet calm in the midst of hard work. There was a sense of harmony in how he moved, a balance between strength and gentleness that fascinated her. She realized that she admired him not just for his abilities, but for the way he lived, mindful, careful, and in tune with the world around him. One evening, after a long day of labor, they sat by the fire together. She watched the flames flicker and listened to the crackle of burning wood. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with a sense of understanding that needed no words. She thought about how far she had come since first arriving at the cabin, and a sense of gratitude welled up within her. She had found not only a place to survive, but also a person who saw her, truly saw her, and accepted her without question. Her nights were often spent reflecting on her past and the journey that had brought her here. Memories of abandonment and loneliness still surfaced, but they no longer held the same power over her. The mountain man's presence was a constant reminder that she could rebuild her life piece by piece in a place where she was valued. She began to feel a sense of hope that had been absent for so long, a quiet belief that her life could change for the better, and that she could be part of something meaningful. The mountain man also began to reveal glimpses of his past. He shared stories of growing up in the mountains, learning the ways of the land and the lessons he had learned from hardship and solitude. She listened intently, feeling a deep connection to his experiences. It was through these stories that she began to understand him, not just as a companion, but as a person with his own struggles, his own triumphs, and his own capacity for care and understanding. She realized that trust worked both ways, and that he had also chosen to allow her into his life, just as she was slowly allowing him into hers. As they spent more time together, they faced small challenges that tested their cooperation and patience. Heavy rains threatened the cabin structure, and they worked together to reinforce the roof and secure their food stores. Cold nights required them to ensure the firewood supply was sufficient, and she learned to anticipate the needs of the cabin and the man who maintained it. Each challenge was met with teamwork, and through these shared experiences their bond grew stronger. They began to rely on each other in ways that went beyond mere survival, forming a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. One afternoon, while gathering wild herbs for cooking, she stumbled upon a patch of delicate flowers growing in a hidden corner of the forest. Their colors were bright against the green undergrowth, and she felt a sense of wonder and joy that she had rarely experienced. She picked a few carefully and brought them back to the cabin, placing them on the table as a small offering, a gesture of gratitude for the life she was beginning to build. The mountain man noticed, and a faint smile crossed his face. He did not say much, but the appreciation in his eyes spoke volumes. It was a simple exchange, yet it carried weight. A shared understanding of the beauty in small acts and the importance of noticing the world around them. Evenings often became moments of quiet reflection. They would sit by the fire, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply watching the flames. She found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had never expressed to anyone else. He listened patiently, offering gentle guidance when needed, but never judgment. In these moments, she began to understand the depth of human connection, how trust and care could transform even the loneliest heart. She realized that her life, once defined by fear and isolation, was slowly opening to the possibility of love, companionship, and belonging. Winter approached, and with it, new challenges. The cold was harsh and snow blanketed the mountains, making travel difficult and life more demanding. She worked alongside the mountain man to ensure the cabin was secure, the firewood plentiful, and food stores sufficient. The work was grueling, but she no longer felt the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her past. She had skills, knowledge, and a partner who relied on her as much as she relied on him. There was a sense of pride in their accomplishments, a recognition that together they could endure hardships that would have been insurmountable alone. During one particularly cold night, she sat close to the fire, wrapped in blankets, and thought about how far she had come. She remembered the lonely nights under the open sky, the towns that had rejected her, and the endless journey that had brought her to this place. She realized that every step, every struggle had led her here, to a cabin in the mountains with a man who had shown her kindness and trust. The thought filled her with a quiet joy, a sense of peace she had never known. Through these experiences, she began to recognize a change within herself. The fear that had once controlled her actions was giving way to courage. The loneliness that had been her constant companion was replaced by connection, and the sense of being invisible and nameless was slowly fading, replaced by the recognition that she had value, that she was seen, and that she could be loved and trusted. Each day brought small victories, moments of learning, and the growing understanding that life could hold beauty and meaning, even in the most unexpected places. As winter deepened, she and the mountain man faced challenges that tested their resolve. Snowstorms blocked the trails and hunting became more difficult. Yet they faced these hardships together, relying on each other's strengths and learning to anticipate each other's needs. The partnership they had built was more than just practical, it was emotional, a bond forged through shared struggle, care, and mutual respect. She realized that trust and love were intertwined, that by opening her heart and sharing her life, she had gained something far greater than she had ever imagined. Through it all, she remained cautious, aware that life was unpredictable and that change could come suddenly. But she also allowed herself to hope, to dream, and to believe in the possibility of a future filled with security, companionship, and even happiness. The mountain man had shown her that it was possible to rebuild a life from nothing, to find trust and connection in unexpected places, and to discover strength and courage within oneself. As another long day ended and they settled by the fire, she felt a sense of contentment she had never known. She was no longer entirely alone, no longer invisible, and no longer nameless. She had found a place to belong, a person who saw her, and a life that, while challenging, was filled with purpose, learning, and growing connection. The mountains had become more than just a refuge. They had become a home, a sanctuary, and a place where love and trust could slowly take root and flourish. Winter had passed, leaving the mountains quiet and still, covered in a blanket of melting snow. The days grew longer and the forest slowly awakened with the fresh sounds of spring. She felt a lightness in her heart she had never known before, a sense that life could be gentle and good. The mountain man continued his work, and she followed closely, learning not only how to survive but also how to appreciate the simple beauty of the world around them. Together they repaired fences, planted new crops and maintained the cabin, each task strengthening their bond and mutual respect. One afternoon, while exploring a new section of the forest, they encountered a sudden thunderstorm. Dark clouds rolled in quickly and rain began to pour. The wind howled through the trees, rattling branches and sending leaves flying. They ran together toward a natural rock shelter, laughing as they stumbled through the wet underbrush. For the first time, she felt an exhilaration that had nothing to do with fear or survival. It was pure, simple joy, shared with someone who cared deeply for her safety. In that moment, she realized that she trusted him completely, and the thought warmed her more than the fire ever could. Once they were safe in the shelter, she looked at him and saw the concern in his eyes, the quiet assurance that he would not let anything harm her. The trust between them had grown stronger than either had realized, forged through weeks of shared effort, learning, and silent companionship. She felt her heart flutter in a way it had never done before, an unfamiliar yet welcome sensation. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that she loved him, not just for his kindness, but for the person he was, the strength, the wisdom, and the quiet depth she had come to admire. As the storm passed and they returned to the cabin, the forest smelled fresh, and the air was filled with the scent of wet earth and blooming flowers. She moved more confidently now, her steps lighter and her mind at ease. She realized that her past fears and doubts were slowly being replaced by hope and a growing sense of belonging. The mountain man noticed the change in her, and though he never spoke of it directly, she could see his own feelings reflected in the small gestures he made, offering her the best portions of food, leaving warm blankets near her when she slept, and sharing quiet moments by the fire without expecting anything in return. Days turned into weeks, and their relationship deepened further. She began to anticipate his needs, helping him carry supplies, tending the garden, and watching over the cabin when he ventured further into the forest. He, in turn, continued to teach her more advanced skills, tracking animals, understanding weather patterns, and recognizing subtle signs in the forest that indicated danger or opportunity. Each lesson was given patiently, without rush, and she felt gratitude not just for the knowledge, but for the way he included her as an equal, as someone whose presence mattered. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the edge of a hill near the cabin, she spoke softly, almost hesitantly. She told him about dreams she had once had, before life had made her wary of hope. He listened quietly, nodding with understanding, never interrupting or judging. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and for a moment the world seemed still and perfect. She realized that sharing these thoughts with him made her feel lighter, freer, and more connected than she had ever felt with anyone else. The mountain man began to share his own dreams as well, speaking of how he had longed for companionship, for someone to understand the quiet rhythms of his life, and for the simple comfort of shared silence. Listening to him, she felt a deep connection, a sense that their lives were weaving together naturally without force or expectation. She realized that trust and love were emerging together slowly but surely, and that both were rooted in understanding, respect, and shared experience. A turning point came when they faced a particularly challenging task, repairing a section of the cabin roof damaged by winter storms. The work was difficult and dangerous, requiring coordination, strength, and careful planning. They worked side by side, communicating with gestures and brief words, and successfully completed the repairs. The sense of accomplishment was immense, but more importantly, they experienced a profound bond strengthened through cooperation, trust, and mutual reliance. In that moment, she understood that love was not only about feelings but about actions, about being present and dependable when it mattered most. As spring deepened into summer, they spent more time together in quiet moments of leisure. They explored the forest, fished in the streams, and shared stories by the fire. She began to notice the small things, the way he smiled when he was pleased with her work, the way he listened when she spoke, and the subtle ways he anticipated her needs. These gestures, small but consistent, made her heart swell with affection. She realized that she no longer wanted to leave, that the thought of parting from him brought an unfamiliar ache in her chest. One warm evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, she found herself sitting close to him by the fire, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. She had never spoken of her feelings so directly before, but now, with the mountains surrounding them and the quiet night as their witness, she felt compelled to be honest. She took a deep breath and said softly, "I think I care for you, more than I have ever cared for anyone." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight, and for the first time, he spoke words that carried his own truth. "I care for you too, more than I realized I could." The admission hung in the air, delicate and powerful, marking a new chapter in their relationship. From that moment, their connection deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Trust had transformed into love, steady and gentle, built on the foundation of shared work, shared hardships, and shared life. They moved through the days with a new understanding, a quiet joy in each other's presence and an appreciation for the bond they had cultivated. Love was no longer a distant concept. It was a living, breathing part of their daily existence. They continued to face challenges, as life in the mountains was never easy, but they met each obstacle together. Heavy rains, sudden storms, and difficult terrain tested their resilience and problem-solving skills. Yet with each challenge, their trust and reliance on each other grew stronger. She realized that love was not only in the peaceful moments but also in the shared effort, in the support and care offered when life demanded the most. The mountain man too recognized that the partnership they had built was invaluable, a bond that went beyond mere companionship and into the realm of deep, abiding love. As summer turned to fall, they began to plan for the future together. They worked to expand their garden, store food for the coming winter, and make the cabin even more comfortable. Each task, done in cooperation, strengthened their relationship and reinforced the sense of home they were building together. She realized that she had found not only love but also stability, a sense of belonging, and a life that allowed her to grow, learn, and thrive. In quiet moments, she reflected on her journey, the lonely nights, the harsh towns, the endless wandering, and felt gratitude for the unexpected path that had led her to the mountains and to the man who had given her so much more than shelter and food. He had given her trust, kindness, and the possibility of love. And in return, she had offered her presence, her care, and her own growing love. Together they had created something beautiful, a life of shared purpose and mutual respect. As the sun set over the mountains one evening, painting the sky with gold and crimson, she looked at him and knew in her heart that she was ready to embrace the life he offered, ready to fully open her heart, and ready to say yes to a future that promised love, safety, and belonging. In the quiet of the forest, surrounded by the world they had built together, she realized that she had finally found a place to call home, and a heart to call her own. The days following her decision to fully embrace life with the mountain man were filled with a new sense of purpose and joy. She moved with a confidence born from trust, knowing that she was no longer alone in the world. Together they tended to the cabin, the garden, and the forest surrounding them, creating a home that reflected both of their efforts and their growing bond. The mountains, once a place of isolation and struggle, had become a sanctuary of love, safety, and belonging. She discovered that love was not only in grand gestures but in the smallest details, the way he brought her a cup of warm tea on chilly mornings, the gentle guidance he gave her when she struggled with new tasks, and the quiet, steady presence that made her feel secure even in the darkest moments. She began to see that trust and love were intertwined, each feeding the other, creating a foundation that could withstand any challenge the mountains might bring. Their daily routines became shared rituals. She would wake early to fetch water from the stream, while he prepared firewood for the day. They worked side by side, laughing at small mishaps and celebrating minor successes. Each task, no matter how simple, strengthened their partnership and deepened their understanding of one another. She realized that happiness was not found in extraordinary events alone, but in the consistency of shared life and mutual care. As the seasons changed, she felt a growing connection not only to the mountain man but to the land itself. She learned to read the weather, to recognize animal tracks, and to anticipate the needs of the forest. Every discovery, every lesson brought a sense of accomplishment and wonder. She marveled at how much she had grown, both physically and emotionally, and she knew that none of this would have been possible without the guidance and patience of the man who had taken her in when she had nothing to offer but herself. One spring morning, while tending the garden together, she noticed the vibrant blooms of flowers and the ripening of vegetables. She felt a quiet pride, realizing that their combined efforts had transformed the land around the cabin into a place of beauty and abundance. The mountain man smiled at her, acknowledging her hard work and dedication. In that moment, she felt fully seen, valued, and appreciated. It was a feeling that had been foreign to her for so long, and she embraced it with all her heart. As their life together continued, they faced challenges that tested their patience, resilience, and trust. A sudden storm once threatened to flood the cabin, and they worked tirelessly to reinforce its foundations and protect their supplies. During another harsh winter, food became scarce, and they relied on each other's skills and judgment to survive. Through every obstacle, they discovered the strength of their partnership, realizing that together they could overcome anything the mountains presented. Evenings became moments of reflection and connection. They would sit by the fire, sharing stories, memories, and dreams. She spoke of her past, of the loneliness and uncertainty that had defined much of her life, and he listened without judgment, offering support and understanding. In return, he shared his experiences, his struggles, and his hopes for the future. Through these exchanges, they developed a deep emotional intimacy, a bond built on honesty, respect, and mutual care. One particularly clear night, as the stars glittered above the mountains, she felt compelled to express her gratitude. She spoke softly, recounting the journey that had led her to him and the transformation she had experienced since arriving at the cabin. The mountain man listened, his eyes reflecting the firelight and the quiet depth of his feelings. He reached for her hand, and in that simple gesture, they communicated everything words could not capture: the trust, the love, and the unspoken promise of a shared life. Over time, they began to make plans for the future. They discussed expanding the garden, storing food for the coming seasons, and preparing for the challenges that life in the mountains would inevitably bring. Each decision was made together, reflecting their shared commitment to the life they had built and their dedication to one another. She realized that love was not only about emotion, but about shared responsibility, mutual support, and the willingness to face the world together. As the months passed, their connection deepened further. She felt a sense of peace and contentment that she had never known, a quiet joy in the knowledge that she was loved and valued. She understood that the mountain man had given her more than just a home. He had given her a sense of identity, belonging, and purpose. In return, she offered her presence, her care, and her growing love, creating a partnership that was both resilient and tender. The seasons continued to change, bringing new challenges and new beauty. They celebrated small victories, shared laughter and quiet moments, and supported each other through difficulties. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had led her to this life, recognizing that every hardship, every lonely night, and every moment of uncertainty had prepared her for the love and stability she had found. One day, as they walked through the forest, she reflected on the transformation in her life. She remembered the girl who had wandered alone, nameless and uncertain, and she marveled at how far she had come. She realized that she had found not only love, but also a home, a sense of purpose, and a life filled with connection and meaning. The mountains, once a place of solitude and struggle, had become a sanctuary of hope, resilience, and enduring love. As the sun set over the peaks, painting the sky in hues of gold and red, she looked at the mountain man and felt a profound sense of belonging. She had found someone who saw her, valued her, and loved her unconditionally, and in return she had found the courage to open her heart, to trust, and to embrace the life they were building together. She knew that challenges would come, as they always did, but she felt ready to face them with him by her side. In the quiet of the evening, as the stars appeared and the world settled into a peaceful rhythm, she realized that she had finally found everything she had longed for: love, trust, companionship, and a place to call home. She understood that life's hardships had led her to this moment, and she embraced it fully with gratitude, hope, and a heart open to the future. Together, they would continue to navigate the mountains, facing each day with courage, resilience, and the quiet, enduring bond of love that had grown between them. She was no longer alone or nameless. She was seen, valued, and loved, and she knew that she had finally found her place in the world.